Awesome. So we might get started straight away. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're delighted to have you tune in. My name's Natasha and I'm from the Mable marketing team. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. We pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So, for this webinar, we're joined by Laura and Joe from Resourcing Inclusive Communities. Laura and Joe have been working towards the real inclusion and meaningful connections alongside people with disability for the last few decades, bringing that experience to life with the work of family advocacy and resourcing inclusive communities. Together, Joe and Laura work with families, allies, and professionals to share insights, strategies, and real life stories that show how individuals with disability can and do thrive in the heart of our communities. So, as you can see, there's a chat box below. So, feel free to ask any questions that you might have throughout the webinar, and the team will try the best to answer all your questions at the end. So, I'm excited to hand it over to Laura and Joe. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Natasha. Really appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Natasha.
Yeah, we're really excited to be here, and we are from Resourcing Inclusive Communities and Family Advocacy, which is an organisation that's been around for over 30 years now, providing information and resources to assist people with disability to live meaningful lives within their communities with the support of their families, and in this context, there's people that support them as well. So we're really excited to be sharing with you a little bit around the social connection piece that we all play in people's lives. And one thing that we did want to acknowledge as well is the traditional owners, off the back of Natasha's acknowledgement there. But this is an image that we hold in our office quite proudly, created by a man named Adam Bishop, who's a Wiradjuri man from Western Sydney. And it's essentially his interpretation of the vision for people with disability to be included in their everyday communities, where he's named it Welcoming Everyone Everywhere. So just wanted to share that little anecdote as well. Like Natasha said, we'll sort of go through quite a bit of content today, and we'll have some questions at the end. And there's lots to get through as well. So we're hoping that today you'll leave with a few of strategies and ideas to allow you to create more social connections in the lives of the people that you're supporting. And the other thing that we'll be focusing on today is about building relationships between people with and without disability, as we know that this can bring a lot of value to people's lives, and we often know it can be a little bit more challenging to bring about those types of relationships. So we'll be really focusing on those types of connections, starting with what makes a good life, thinking typical, and bringing about what we call valued roles in a person's life that allows them to connect to their community and to build connections through the right context. And then finally wrapping up with a little bit about how support can play a role as a bridge to relationships and to connections as well. Now, a lot of the material that we will talk about today does and can be linked back to a framework called social role valorization, or SRV for short, to save our breath a little bit this afternoon. And it really just focuses on addressing the devaluation of marginalized groups, including people with disability. And it will provide a bit of ideas and actions and strategies that we can take to counteract against some of those negative perceptions, so as to add value or valorize in the right terminology there. So we'll play a little bit around with the correct terminology of SRV, but also just talk about it in really everyday terms as well. Okay, let's jump in. It's lovely to see everyone joining from all over the country. So it's very nice to see all those locations popping up. So we're going to continue using the chat, so hands at the ready if you can. But we want you to think about your own life, just, a nice little moment to reflect. And when you do think about your own life, what are some of those elements that are most important to you? What makes your life a really good one? What are those things that stand out to you? Joe, maybe you can read them out for us if you can.
Yeah. Okay, so just seeing with it, thinking things like family.
Yep, family. Anyone else in the chat as well?
Anyone want to? Friends,
Yeah.
social activities we've got in here. Being able to be of service, helping others, friends, hobbies.
Yeah.
Uh, employment, food, so autonomy, friendship, comfort, safety, going to the gym.
Oh yes, the gym.
Yes,
My
community
kind of
involvement.
person.
Yes. We've got a question about, are we recording as well? So
Yes, the session will be recorded and it will
yeah,
be posted on YouTube this evening.
beautiful.
Excellent. You can see if you think your pets, health,
Equal,
travel,
health,
yeah.
family, friends, community, equality, peace, learning,
Absolutely.
feeling safe, church fellowship.
Absolutely. So there's a whole range of things here, and you guys, you guys are getting it so quickly. And like we, ta-da, one we prepared earlier. A lot of the things that you might have put in the chat, or if you're thinking about just to yourself as well, you might find on this slide here. And these are the things you can't necessarily buy, right? For all of us as individuals, these are important aspects because they provide richness, variety, choice, safety, purpose, happiness, fulfillment. And so many of these things are pretty typical and ordinary things of life. To feel safe, to be respected, to have a happy home and opportunities. And so what we really want to reframe and start off with is that people with disability are, it's equally as important for them to be achieving and striving for these things as well. And doing that through the lens of thinking typical. So in SRV, there's a theme called the culturally valued analog. And in everyday terms, that is about thinking typical. And it's about really framing in any of the support that we're looking at through the lens of something that might be appropriate and typical of someone's age, the settings and where they might be spending time, what they might be doing with their time, the expectations that we hold of ourselves and other people around us, who we surround ourselves with, what we might be wearing, what are our aspirations and our goals, and all of those sorts of things that can sort of guide the ways that we could be supporting to ensure relevancy. And of course, what we'll talk about shortly is the enhancement of a person's perception to the broader community. So as to ensure that they are one of the community, people are, all equally valued. Now, one of the biggest concepts of SRV, social role valorization, is that people are much more likely to be given the good things of life, the one that we spoke about just before, if they hold socially valued roles in their lives. So essentially, we all hold valued roles, and these are the things that sort of unconsciously are around us and are seen as valued in our society. And they act as a means for people to contribute and participate in community life. And they can be a tool that enables a person and their sort of circle of people around them to enable the vision of the good things of life, to make sure that we achieve those things. So we can see on the screen that we have Emily is a driver, Jade is a business owner, Dale is a housemate, Rhiannon there is a choir member. And what you can see sort of first off is that people are defined by their roles and not by any diagnosis. And so, like I said, we all hold various roles. So for example, right now, a role that I'm holding is employee of resourcing inclusive communities. And so just like we did in the Good Life, we want to briefly reflect on our own roles, and it kind of helps you get an idea of where to sort of start thinking about. So if again, thinking about your own life, and we'll we'll use the chat. And then, Jo, what I might do while everyone's adding their comments into the chat is maybe you could share a little bit about Rachel, who you can do a bit of an introduction to as well around who Rachel is.
Yeah.
But we all hold roles in our lives. And so the first, I suppose, pillar we might look at is the roles that we hold in relationships. And so, for example, I might commonly hold a role of sister. And so what are some of the roles you might be holding? And Jo, you want to share a little bit around Rachel's roles and who Rachel is?
Yes, yes. So Rachel is my daughter who's in her late 20s, and she's a multimodal communicator. So she is a friend, a daughter, a cousin. Um, she's a neighbor. She's a community contributor. So she's got lots of valued relationships in her community.
And we can see in the chat, there's a few here too: mother, mentor, daughters, carer, friend. So yeah, these are the roles that people hold within their relationships, and it can go on and on. Often we call these ascribed roles. They're often sort of given to us by birthright sometimes. Auntie, niece, nephew, uncle, grandfather, so on and so forth. Another channel we might be able to look at, and this is, I see a few mothers that are listing here, so this is my favorite one to ask. What are some of the roles that you hold at home? What are some of the roles you might hold at home? How about you, Jo? Either yourself
Yeah.
or Rachel?
Me, Jack of all trades or Jill of all trades. Um, yeah, I'm thinking roles. Rachel, do you want some of Rachel's roles?
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's a cook, a cleaner, homemaker, entertainer. Um, she's got anything that you can think of that you do in your home. She has got a role in being involved in. She's involved in absolutely everything that happens in the home, to whatever capacity that she can do. She's involved in those roles.
We've got a group of lots of involved people with cleaners, cooks, drivers, advisors, 2IC, peacekeeper, organizer,
I like the cat slave because yes, Rachel's a
gardener,
cat slave and so am
yeah,
I.
cat slave, yeah, jack of all trades, social secretary, yeah, helper. One thing you might be starting to notice is some of the roles are sort of verbs, or like cleaner, so it's like a doing role, as opposed to cleaning.
Mm,
That's
mm,
sort of just a bit of a differentiation, because there's more to a role than just the task. Excellent. So there's lots coming through there. Maid, admin, yeah, pet sitter. Let's do one more. Let's look at some of the community roles. You mentioned Rachel had a few community
Many
roles.
roles. Yeah, yeah. So she's a business owner. She's taught art classes. She does teach art classes. There's a picture up on the slide there of her presenting to community. She's involved in dancing, pole dancing in the community. So she's got lots of different roles in her community. She volunteers. She um, provides prizes for local organisations that are raising money. So yeah, and she's a
And you
taxpayer.
mentioned neighbour as well,
Neighbour. I did
earlier in
mention
your
that earlier. Yeah,
introduction. Yeah, so
yeah,
there's lots
yeah.
of those community roles, and so um, feel free to share any of the community roles that you hold as well. Might be, I think someone earlier said they gym member. We've had some churchgoers, all those sorts of things that we saw earlier that were really important to people as well. Hamper distributor,
Yeah.
facilitator, absolutely. So,
Another one that's quite good in community, Laura, I'm just thinking there's gifting with the integrity Facebook sites and things that people are moderators on. But that's
yeah,
a very valued,
social moderators.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, for a lot of these, this is what we're calling a bit of a role stock take, right? They were having a look at what are all the things that we hold in our lives. And again, we've got a bit of a prepared earlier version here. But what we can see is that for many of us in our lives, some of us, we might feel like we have too many roles, perhaps a little bit too many hats, and we're trying to balance them all at once. Now, often the experience of people with disability might be one of role famished, you know, or not holding enough roles in their lives, or commonly holding those ascribed roles that we said that you kind of just get given as opposed to achieving like employment, for example, or tenancy where you need to apply for things. So we're looking to build the sort of a larger array of roles in people's lives, because a valued role isn't just sort of a label. It sort of comes with a whole bunch of things, and those are expected behaviors. It comes with responsibility. Often all those roles that you looked at, there's probably some responsibility that came with it, whether it is to get the snacks, retrieve the snacks, or to be the first responder. There's a responsibility there. That comes with expectations, but it also comes with privileges as well. And so our role as support is to ensure that people are working towards building or strengthening the existing valued roles that they hold in their lives, rather than actually taking over and being the role that itself. Now, when we talk about valued roles, the other part of our role is to not just build the valued ones, but also to avoid what might be seen as negative roles. Now, I'm going to show you a few examples of some of those negative roles that are highlighted through social role valorization. And just a slight, I suppose, content warning is it can be really challenging to hear, but it's also really important. It's important because, you know, we want to ensure that people are not having their valued roles overlooked in lieu of those pre-existing stereotypes that are held by others. And it's just a context that people are cast into these roles as opposed to by others, as opposed to being that role itself. So let me talk to a couple of examples here. Okay, so often we'll hear about this as stereotypes or, you know, labeling, when in SRV we call it devalued roles, from a process called devaluation. One of those roles that people are commonly cast into is the role of child or eternal child, particularly for those that might have an intellectual disability. You know, you commonly hear things like mental age of, and it often refers to a child's age, even if the person is an adult. And what can be dangerous about that is that if people are perceived as children, we're less likely to be afforded adulthood opportunities to develop, to grow, perhaps achieve employment, or to, you know, move out of home and get all of those things that sort of come with being an adult. And so as support, it's our role to sort of counter against that by using things like adult language and holding adult expectations, encouraging adult image and interests around people. And Joe, I think we spoke about this the other day. There was like an example around interests and sort of evolving that through from childhood to adulthood. Is that?
Yeah. So obviously, children quite often are drawn to music, and Rachel, like any other child, loved the Wiggles. You know, most toddlers love Wiggles, but that's for toddler years. And so then, you know, as she grew, became really focused on Hannah Montana, that's her generation. And Hannah Montana was all the flavor for a while. And then as she got older, so did Hannah Montana, and Hannah Montana then found out that she was really Miley and worked out who she was, and so then she went on the journey of following Miley. So yeah, so it's just that's a typical natural progression for a child into adulthood. Obviously, interests will change in different generations and between personal interests.
Yeah, and I think that just talks to people evolving as well. You know, there might come with some more risks if Rachel had still had that interest in Wiggles or Hannah Montana as a nearly 30-year-old woman. And so it just sort of helps to portray that adult image as just one of those examples of the negative roles. There's quite a few there, as we can see. You know, if people are at risk of being seen as a burden, then it is our role to ensure that we're highlighting the contributions and the competencies that people bring to the community to sort of counter against that. The other role that we can see there that might be of question mark might be the client or participant role. Now, for many of us, we are in a client role in parts of our lives. You know, I'm a client of a hairdresser or a tax agent or the doctor, for example. And so what is different about that is that it's a temporary role. If people are cast into a client or participant role, you know, for the majority of their lives, and that is of a human service, what tends to happen is people are done to and done for, as opposed to supported along that journey to fulfill the valued roles that they do hold. So that is sort of, again, something we need to think about, and that's where, you know, support might be able to be better focused at blending in, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next little bit as well. If people are at risk of being seen in that patient or sick role, and that might be because of the impact of their disability. One example I've had of a colleague of mine was talking about a family member or a person they knew that happened to not be able to control the saliva coming from their mouth. And so instead of putting something like a bib, that we actually there was actually a decision made to, why don't we just use a scarf? It's much more adult-like, you know, it's less likely to be perceived as sick. So it's just trying to encapsulate and avoid those negative roles and portray valued roles. And if someone is important to be dressed well, you know, if they're at a university in their valued role, then we want to portray that same image as well.
I think that's subhuman, Laura, the subhuman one. I think earlier in the chat we had the mention of cat slave and dog slave, and yes, was light-hearted comments. But the word slave is a subhuman connotation. So even in that light humour, we still need to be very mindful that others don't take that you know, use that the wrong way, because it can actually set people's mindsets.
Yeah, and that comes back to the vulnerability or risk of people being cast into those roles. If there's those pre-existing ideas, then we sometimes need to really counter back the other way with those valued roles. And like we said, people don't often choose these roles for themselves, and it's not necessarily that they are or are not in the role, it's whether they are perceived to be in that role. It's not fair, but it's unfortunately the way things often are in our society. So we want to really encourage pushing against those stereotypes that people are held in those valued roles: tenant, employee, a friend, a student, first and foremost to any of those other roles. Now, when we have valued roles in our lives, whether valued or devalued, they are communicated through 6 channels, I suppose you can call them, or 6 communicating types. And that talks to, where does the role happen? Who is it performed with? What do you do in that role? What do you look like when you're in the role? When does it happen? And what are all the other clues and tricks and signages and logos and stuff that help portray that role? So, for example, I talked about I was in the role of employee at the moment. So where, you know, today it's happening on Zoom, it's performed with a co-presenter and an audience. It's the actions are to prepare the presentation and to speak and to send resources later. The appearance is to, you know, be appropriately dressed. You can leave your feedback later. Be nice. When, you know, it's happening at the right time, we are all here at 4 o'clock on, you know, Thursday the 28th. And some of the other languages, there's a logo up that side of me. We're talking about things like valued roles. So all of that sort of stuff, clues and context to what role I might be holding. And so the same thing would go for any other role that people are in. So maybe we can talk to an example here, Joe, for a role that maybe Rachel holds.
Holds, yes.
Check.
Dancer,
Dancer, yeah.
dancer, yes. So she's a
So
pole,
if we talk about it through this thing, you know, where does the role happen for dancer for Rachel?
so she dances. For her, it's at the studio.
Yeah. With
People with other dancers, other dancing students, and the actions. Well, they're dancing.
yeah.
Their appearances. Well, they're wearing dance gear, active wear dance gear. And when it's usually of an evening, classes are usually outside of course, because Rachel's an adult, it's usually outside of typical work hours. Although, you know, the hours this day and age are all over the place with work, but yeah, typically out of hours. And the language. Rachel actually does pole dancing, and Rachel is also an AAC user, an alternative augmentative communication user. And so all the pole dancing language that she needs to use during her classes is all programmed into her communication device. So she has access to that all the time.
Yeah. And now the thing with the role communicators is that all of the elements need to be in place for the role to be seen as legitimate and not to be overruled by negative roles. So for example, if I had all of these things in place and then I'm sitting here with a scuba diving headset on, you might be looking a little bit confused as to what is actually going on here. And so confusion sort of takes away the legitimacy of the role. So we need all of the elements to be in place. Now, the same thing goes for support. So anybody supporting a person in a role should also have those same role communicators considered for themselves as well. You know, if somebody is a gym member and they're at the gym, they're around other gym goers, you know, they're doing their bicep curls and they are in active wear, they're there at, you know, 5 p.m. with the other gym goers and they are talking about their sets and reps, you know, as part of the language cues. And then somebody next to them supporting is in jeans and a lanyard and, you know, flip-flop shoes, they're going to look out of place and we're actually undermining the role, reverting them back to the client of a human service. So it's really important that support also are in the same role communicators to ensure that the person's role is upheld. So look at our timing, we're doing okay. When we're looking at those role communicators, you know, some of the other things that we can do around the action piece is add contribution. It means that people can be seen deeper within their role and more embedded to that as well. So we're thinking about when we're in places, not what can we do here, but who can we be in our community? You know, like I said, it's more than just those actions. So who can we be in our family settings? And Joe, you talked a little bit earlier about some of the roles and the contributions that Rachel has in her family setting.
Yes. Well, she's the bedroom cleaner. She's the breakfast preparer, the birthday planner, organising for the next day. You know, she's basically scheduling, getting the household all organised and scheduling.
Yeah.
Writing shopping list writer.
Yeah. And so we all in our families hold various roles. I think, you know, my sister is the gift arranger and the reminder of all the gifts. And, you know, my dad used to be the grocery shopper. And so there's all those contributions that people put in, and we want everybody to have their roles within those settings. The other one might be in our neighborhoods. You mentioned Rachel was a neighbor. So are there some of the contributions that Rachel has?
Yes. So with the photos that are on that slide, she's a Porch Fest organizer. So she was actually a Porch Fest performer, and a Halloween host. She has a garden, and so she shares her produce with the neighbours, and she's an art teacher. Just a few of the roles that she has. She also connects with the local men's shed and supports other different things that are happening in the town.
Yeah, and I think that talks to some of those community, who Rachel is in the community, like you said earlier, is the prize
Yeah,
contributor you said earlier.
prize contributor, yeah, and the picture with the two ladies in the bottom left-hand corner. She met those two ladies at Porchfest, and from Porchfest she then met them at the pub. Didn't know them beforehand, and they turns out they're very well connected in the local art community, and so she's naturally found those connections herself just through dancing on someone's front lawn. So yeah, it's amazing how you can connect with your neighbours when you're actually in that space.
I think one of those roles, I mean, that last photo in communities, who we can be in our communities, you can see Rachel as a concert goer, but as part of her contribution as a concert goer, we're talking about the driving role.
Mm. Yes, so she was she has her own vehicle, and so she was the designated person to pick everybody up and go to the concert, and then yeah, so she quite often will take her vehicle and pick everybody up to go wherever they're going. And she's an art raffle prize contributor, as we mentioned earlier. And she also does marketing for the Pole Studio and performs at various different marketing events that they have. Yeah.
And so just an example, we've got a booklet called Developing the Community Connection. So I've hyperlinked that there. We can send that across later as well. But just supporting people to think about what are the other elements within these places that they might be already attending. What are the other steps that we can do to make a contribution that does bring us closer to people as well? So wrapping up a little bit around the valued roles, what would be sort of wrapping up is that the more roles that people have in their lives and the more valued that those roles are, the more likely they'll be given those good things of life. So that's sort of the key premise of social role valorization. But we do want to dive into the role of support as the bridge to relationships and valued roles and friendships. So it's important that people, supporters are the connection between relationships as opposed to being the relationship itself. The supporters, we're here to show the path for a person with disability, to connect to others and for others to know how to connect to the person as well, and nurture some of their shared interests and passions and sort of be almost like a bit of a matchmaker role sometimes. Now, we said not to be the relationship itself, and we say this because we know that there's often people can be paid supporters and calling themselves a friend. Now, there's a few things we want to talk to this, but the very first thing is that by very nature, a friendship is freely given, and so there's no such thing as a paid friend. If you're paid to support a person with disability and you call yourself a friend, it can come at a risk of creating unrealistic expectations that may eventually lead to disappointment. What happens when the supporter leaves? And it can also create barriers to other friendships. Why would I need to find other friends? I've already got a friend. And so we all, many of us will have great intentions of trying to call ourselves a friend. However, and we might intend to maintain a friendship or relationship after those checks stop, but commonly life can get in the way and may not necessarily eventuate that way. So this isn't to say a worker role can't become a friend after they stop being paid, but we recommend that not being done while being paid. In SRV terms, we call this wounding, because it becomes a bit of a repeated cycle of friends coming and going. None of us want to lose a friend. It's always hurtful and a bit of a rejection if we're losing a friend. It can be confusing of what friendship actually looks like and what friends do and don't do. And it can also make it harder for the next person that steps into the role, because now we're supporting a grieving person who's lost a friend. And now there's pressure to resolve that grief by calling yourself a friend again to fill the gap. And so you can sort of see this cycle happening in people's lives. And after all of that, we may not feel that, you know, maybe I don't deserve friends after all, because it can be quite confusing. So I think it's just about ensuring that our role is to be that bridge to other people and connecting that. So we've got a few examples that we'll spell through here now as well. So a few of those things that the role that support is, the first one is to hold high expectations, you know, to help the good things of life that we spoke about. To enhance people's roles, using those role communicators, ensuring that people are in the right places, around the right people, doing the things that make sense to other people at the right time, that makes sense. You know, the clue is that we want to create green lights for people to understand that makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, it's a bit of a red light and people may not approach because it's a bit uncertain. So use the role communicators. Know that your purpose is to be the bridge to the relationship rather than the relationship itself. And so when we are a bridge, one of the things we can do is ensure that we're introducing people positively, using their name, their valued roles, that maybe the contribution that they're making, the interest. You know, it might be, this is Joe. Joe is the music selector here at the choir, and we'll be handing out the sheet music to you. I think, Joe, your strength there is actually, you know, all of the music off the top of your head, don't you? And, you know, those are the sorts of things that you want to sort of highlight for people and the commonalities. And this is Jeff, he also likes jazz music. And Joe, you quite like jazz music as well. And just trying to sort of build that glue between people, that positive introduction will be able to sort of help connect. One of the things that makes people a good friend is remembering names of one another. So maybe the role is to assist people to remember and learn names, and it might be using photos, or it might be loading it into the AAC device, like you've sort of said there, Joe, as well.
Yeah, that's really important. People need to be able to connect with people, so everybody they know needs to be in that resource, in that device.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the two things here talks about supporting people to attend places and commitments regularly and finding those valued roles. So we talked about valued roles, but I want to talk about our role as support of providing the right context to a relationship or friendship. We can't force that to happen for people, but we can put a lot of things in place to make it more likely to happen. And so one of the ways of doing this is by starting with one person at a time. You know, everything needs to be individual because every person is different and an individual, like we said earlier, autonomy and freedom and all those sorts of things as part of our good life. And so we want to ensure people are seen in their valued roles within various contexts. So if we look at one individual, we might talk about Rachel in this example, Joe. What we do is we start with one interest. And so let's pick
dancing. Let's go with dancing.
Yeah, we'll go with the dancing again.
Yeah.
So then what we do is we think about, and we can use the chat if you would like to contribute. This is helpful for us to brainstorm. Where are all of the places, all types of places in our community that dancing happens? Where do people who like dancing gather in our communities?
And be broad on your thought of dancing.
Yeah.
So I'll start if you like. So dance studios.
Yep, studios. Weddings.
Sorry, Laura?
Weddings.
Weddings, yeah.
Pubs, nightclubs.
Clubs.
Parties.
That's all. Rolling in our community halls.
Yeah.
Community centres have classes. Backyards, yes.
Yeah.
Porches.
We've got a few pub goers here.
Yeah. Competitions, yes. Kitchens, yes.
Yeah. Zumba. Someone else mentioned. me earlier.
Flash mobs, I think was
Yeah.
mentioned earlier too.
Cleaning around the housework. Yep.
Yeah, yes.
Dance.
Church is another one. Some churches they dance as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Church, school,
School discos.
line dancing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Family get-togethers. What a
Belly
fun bunch of
dancing.
people we have here.
Yeah.
Lots of dancers in the mix.
Belly dancing's another one too.
Yep. Meet-up groups. Great. So what happens in this? We want to brainstorm as many places as we can without ruling anything out. Often we can kind of start ruling things out because we're not sure if it makes, that's not the right thing. It doesn't matter, write it down. And you want a minimum of 10, and we've got quite a few there. And then we would look about on that list of places, which of those places means that we can be attending regularly and predictably, so that it might be weekly or fortnightly, so that it means that we're needing to attend consistently over time. So I think, what do we have here? We had
Dance schools.
dance schools. Yep, that might be one that's regular. Classes, someone said the community centre classes,
Yep.
the weekly church. Yep.
Yep.
And so you're
Pub,
looking at those places that are going to be providing you what we call a presence.
even your pubs and clubs will have, set bands playing at a set time for people
Yeah,
to go
if
and
it's a
dance or set.
Friday live band night every
Yeah.
week. Exactly. So
Yep.
we're looking at, that's the clue of the places that we're looking for to provide a presence. Then the next step would be to be thinking about when we are at those places consistently, what roles and contributions can we start to pick up? And that's where the valued roles come back into it. So if we looked at a dance school, for example, it might be something like, yes, you've got the student or dancer role, but there might also be the marketer or the teacher or the business manager or the accountant or the
Receptionist.
receptionist. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
The music selector, the events planner, the photographers, all of those sorts of roles that people
Studio
might
cleaner.
start to be able to pick up and sort of build their valued role repertoire, I suppose. And then the other thing is picking roles that would be more likely to get you closer to people versus in solitude. So, for example, maybe a cleaner might be more of a solitude role, which might suit somebody as more introverted. However, if our goal is relationship and people, we're more likely to probably want to be in more of a, I don't know, receptionist role, who you meet all the people all the time, where you become familiar. And we often talk about being missed when you're not there. And that's the type of roles we're wanting to cultivate in people's lives, and provide that context to others in the community that this person is belonging to and contributing to the various communities that they are a part of.
And so we've just got a question in here, and I think it's probably worth unpacking a little bit. As support worker, would it be acceptable to initiate group activities for our clients? For example, setting up a meetup group, barbecues, or afternoon teas and parties. Well, I think if that's connecting people with their typical community and looking at the roles that they're going to have in those communities, I think that we may talk to that one a little bit more at the end.
It's actually coming up now, so it works out really
Perfect,
well.
works
We're
out really
talking
well.
about inviting other people in and what we call
Mm.
the art of asking. So
Mm.
it says connect to others, so that would be talking to your point. Thank you for that question. But inviting other people into what we call complementary roles. So we talked about, who does the role happen with? So if I am a presenter, the complementary role might be an audience member. Who else is the role with? If I am a learner, then the complementary role might be the mentor. What's sort of the one that fits the matching role, I suppose you could call it as well. And so one of the roles that we have as support is to initiate and invite people into relationship, because we know that can be challenging for many of us. And the art of asking is actually a paper written, I have hyperlinked it there, haven't I? Yes, I have, by a man named Rick Thompson from far north Queensland. And so we know that it can be challenging for all of us. We also know that sometimes people's impairments can create a bit of a practical dynamic of, oh, I'm not really sure how to go about this. I don't know how to invite myself in, or if I'm welcome to help or welcome to be a part of this. So it can make it a bit more challenging. Devaluation is already an obstacle where people might be seen in those negative roles. But we also know that to have opportunities, it requires that invitation to bear fruit. So it calls for us to be ask prepared. And we want to ask something that is not just too open-ended, because otherwise it's kind of like, how long is a piece of string, right? So we're looking at the ask that is more likely to be giving us a yes answer. So it needs to be relevant. It needs to be very, specific. So is it that you're inviting somebody into a complementary role? One example is, it was a church example actually that another family had shared with me. It was around a man who attends church with his family. It was only two of the family members the following week, and mum was on morning tea duty, but the son didn't want to miss out on the actual church practice itself. And so there had to be an ask that was made of, do you mind being, to another church member, oh, do you mind being sort of the church tour guide for, I'll just enter a different name, Tom here. Tom knows sort of what to do. He just needs a little bit of prompting of when to stand and when to sit, because we get a little bit confused sometimes. And so automatically the tour guide kind of makes sense to the everyday person. Oh yeah, I kind of just got to show him the ropes. And that sort of very specific prompting of what to do might be an ask there as well. And so like we said in that thing, it might be initiating a barbecue or an afternoon tea that you sort of suggested, but think about it in the context of a place that makes sense with an existing community group. So if it's about initiating a barbecue after the regular, I don't know, what activity, the regular sporting club match, then think about where would typical sporting club match people go and do to connect. And it might be, maybe it is those after pub drinks, or maybe it's the barbecue that you have after the game at the canteen with everybody, or something like that. So thinking about that typical lens, always coming back to that there as well.
We've got another comment in there from Libby. And she's she's suggesting that the person that's asked the previous question might be looking at as an independent worker on Mable that might have more than one client, and can they initiate something where they invite all their clients to participate and come together. I'm thinking that in itself is potentially going to close and reduce the opportunities and connections for an individual person, because you really want to tease out and do all that brainstorming on all the things that are unique to it, to that each individual person.
I think there's a few things to that, right? I think when there's multiple, the first thing is we start with one person at a time. When we talked about that context to relationship, it's individual. So the one person at a time starts there. The second thing is, when we talked about the negative roles, is that if there's more than one person who's requiring support, is there going to be more of a risk of that client or participant role? And so if we're trying to avoid the client or participant role, we need to then focus back on the valued role to sort of counter against that. And it means that when we do have multiple people at a time, individuality can be lost, whether that's intentional or not. It's often what happens. The same would go as if there's 5 blonde women standing there. You just assume everyone's all these blonde women, and that's sort of the contributing factor to a group. So I think it is best to really be focusing on one at a time. And it's not to say you can't replicate that with another person and another person in different contexts, but it is about tailoring that individually. But making the ask, if we come back to the art of asking, inviting people that have those shared values. Like if someone asked me to go along to Comic-Con, I'd probably be a little bit confused, because that's probably not my thing. But it might, but if someone said, would you go to the gym? That's a more likely yes, because I'm doing that anyway. And I think about, Jo, the example that you had around the Pink concert.
Yes, yeah, yeah, going to the Pink concert. She's, shared interest. Friends enjoy music, enjoy Pink. So, asking a friend to come along and go to the Pink concert. And we could only get one ticket. Unfortunately, we could only get one ticket, and it was a wheelchair accessible ticket. And that meant that she was going to be sitting with a support person, like a paid person. And all right. And so we thought around it, okay, how can we work this out? And we asked one of her friends if they would be comfortable going and be supporting her, and the support person can wait outside, and if they need to come out and go to bathrooms or anything like that, they can go out and do that. But she actually got to enjoy that concert with her friend, as opposed to having paid support. So that was a really valuable opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one of those other things, as we're sort of slowly getting to the end of our list here, we're trying to get through it. Good support blends in, and the opportunity, looking for the opportunity to step back. And there's a few examples of that. I think we talked about, Joe, the other day around sort of support blending in and not blending in. One of the example around the photo bombing was one of the.
Yes, yes, yeah. They went on a road trip and were visited a friend, caught up with a friend, and then they were out taking photos at the park, and I think they were at the zoo as well. And the support worker was jumping in and photobombing every single photo. When the photos come back to me, I'm thinking, hang on a minute, whose holiday was it? Whose trip was it? It was actually should have been about Rachel and her friend. So yeah,
Yeah,
that was
and
a
that's an example of sort of accidentally and with goodwill, I'm sure,
yes, it
being
was. Yeah,
being the role rather than the context to that role as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so the opportunity to sort of step back might be, like if it was at pole, is there maybe an example around pole with support?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, during pole classes, there's opportunities where the students spot for each other, and if the students are there spotting for each other, well, then the support person can step back and they spot, and Rachel helps out. They spot for each other. They clean the poles between each person and things like that. So there's opportunity that the support worker steps when needed to facilitate or hand something, or and then wherever possible steps back so that the actual class is as natural as everybody else is experiencing it.
Yeah, and that's creating a green light for community as opposed
Yeah,
to a red light. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, Again, nearly there. So, wanting to provide guidance to the group as to how we can engage with other people and prompting people and providing interpretations of communication differences. So, there's a few examples that we have around those facilitation of conversations. Um, and it might be sort of as the connector. There's a first example here. Yes, I'm here with Emily, big fan of the netball, and this particular sporting team, New South Wales Swifts. Yeah, we see you at members events all the time. And she's, yeah, you're joining the ball crew next year, aren't you, Emily? Um, and we find people might talk to you as the supporter as opposed to the person, and that can always be a little bit awkward and tricky. And you don't have to tell them your role. You can just say yes, no, no, yeah, I'm Laura. Yep, here with Emily. But yeah, Emily, you play for Ryde Netball Club, don't you? And that's your favorite position. You got a couple of photos, don't you? And sort of helping people to know how to communicate. Do you? And then there's a question: do you play as well? And trying to help facilitate that conversation between people. Another example is we know of a man named Jonathan, actually, who's when gets very excited might shriek a little bit louder than the average person, and it might sound a little bit alarming to the everyday person. And so the example is Jonathan had a very strong interest in movies, and when was walking around, it was actually like a Blockbuster or a Video Easy. Oh, there's a lot of story back in the day, but it does highlight when he picked up one of the movies he was looking for, let out a really loud scream, and of course, naturally, everyone kind of went on guard and a little bit froze. What is this? And the support worker just said, "Oh, Jonathan, isn't that wonderful? You've found the movie that you were looking for. You look so happy. You sound so excited." And so it's just something simple as that. Who, when he attended regularly, what actually happened was 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, something similar happened. When everyone froze, the shop attendant said, "Oh, that's okay. Jonathan's just very excited. He must have found a movie that he was looking for." just from a really subtle communication interpretation. Or another thing, oh, John, yep, we know you're interested when you're waving that arm, so let's get involved. And again, that really subtle way of saying that's how you look for the yes or the no. It's the arm or it's the eyes, or, helping other people to understand how to do that. Okay, I'm scrambling to the finish, but we are there. So it's just about knowing that there are things that can be missed when we're looking for social connection. And if that is a role that's too far away from other people, we don't really know what to say after hello. There's no positive introduction or facilitation. We have no one helping us to highlight what's in common, that Joe's favorite jazz music with somebody else. If the supporter, it takes over the role, so being mindful of knowing how to step back, or if we're thinking that we are the relationship itself. So we want to just make sure that we're setting up a more likely scenario where we're thinking typically, what would anybody else do? What would I do for myself, or my other children, or my other friends in this situation? Creating a positive first impression, thinking about good image that's going to avoid any negative roles and highlight the positive ones, focusing on the gifts and contributions. Remember that people need to be there consistently to build relationship. One-offs don't necessarily, they might provide variety, but they're not going to build relationship over a longer period of time. And then we can start off by avoiding or minimizing negative roles, building more positive roles, inviting others in to make an ask, and of course, support people to be good community members and be reciprocal rather than having to be equal. It's about, sharing what things that we have to offer one another.
Got a question in the chat, and I think we're actually touching on that now. I think it's Benet. I apologise if I've pronounced it incorrectly. What helps individuals feel valued and involved locally? I think it's what we were just talking about then, that social connection. When you've got that connection and people are engaging with you and building further building that relationship, wanting to spend time with you, that connection, that's when you start when people feel valued, is when they feel that they're wanted and they've got a value to contribute and they've got roles to contribute.
Yeah, I often think about that quote. I think Esther Perel, like the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of our relationships, and relationships are built on contribution and reciprocation. Is that a word? Reciprocal?
Yep,
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Reciprocity.
Reciprocity, that's the word. I've made up my own word after all those words that we spoke about just last hour. But it's the contributions and actions that people take. So that's what helps you feel valued. We think of the story that we've heard in our sort of thing is, even if you were the garbage taker outerer, that role is still valued because you're making a contribution and it makes you feel important. The same goes for in any context. I'm going to read this question as I'm looking at it. How does one write a report when one has taken someone to a disco but has really sat back and the person's been able to be independent? Writing up for Mable, how do they look like they've actually been working? Yeah. So if someone is stepping back and doing the right thing as a support for the people to be engaging on their own, how does that get reported on?
I think that's where the word look is where it actually looks at there, because you should be looking, you obviously need to be there and attentive to what's happening, but in the background you shouldn't be looking like you're involved in, so like you're there, but you shouldn't be the person that everyone's taking notice of. It should actually be the person that's actually in the center of whatever is happening at the disco, the dancing and dancing with other people. You would just be there, depending on the individual's needs. But I think it's about not. I think it's not about actually looking, it's actually about you want to be invisible. I know with my daughter, I want support workers to be making themselves invisible wherever possible and facilitating whatever it is that they need to facilitate for her at the time.
Yeah. I think that partly is a reporting question that might come back to you, Natasha, and Mable as well.
Yeah.
That maybe we can follow up with after.
Yeah, I think so. The reporting side of it, yeah. But I think as far as being invisible, I think that's part of the role.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sorry we took up more time, but there's lots there. And I think I just wanted to sort of wrap up with, you can contact us at any time. We do provide one-on-one support with people and their families and their supporters over the phone for anything that might be coming up, whether they're an advocacy related issue or building some of these valued roles. I talked about the building context to relationship very quickly, and we do have a more in-depth event coming up mid next month. If you want to learn more, we can send a few links to our websites and stuff to have a look at. But hopefully this won't be the last time we connect, or perhaps it's the start of another time we might see some of you again. But I really appreciate your time. And thank you, Mable, for inviting us in.
Just a quick little addition to that, writing things up. I think it's really important to actually record the connections people have so that the next person on the next shift can actually continue those connections happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, ladies. And we'll pop a recording on YouTube tonight. Thanks for joining, and thanks again to the RIC team. Great to have you back for another webinar, and we'll see you again soon.